Morning, David.
Oh, Christopher, you're back.
We're back. We're here.
We're without the delightful Reverend Debs. She's not able to be with us today, but we'll send her our best wishes. I hope she's okay. So it's you and me, and we're going to talk about one of the most complicated things in the world, which is understanding Paul and his letter to the Romans. Which,
as I'm sure you're really aware, the advice you're going to get from two of the best academic theologians in the country.
Oh, without doubt, because the Archbishop of Canterbury is just about to come in through the door, and Tom Wright,
Archbishop,
and Tom Wright is waiting, gagging on the phone to join us.
And we haven't even got our art scholar Joe Neary with us either, have we?
No, we haven't got our university lecturer. No, she's relaxing in the sun in Salisbury, probably.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll cope.
You know, Chris, I've got a good feeling we're gonna have to. So that's so that's good. Well, dear viewer, it's good you're back, or if you're watching us, you're back with us, and thanks for the ticks and the likes and the things last week, and some nice comments from you all. And it's good to know that you're out there, because if we didn't know you were out there, we'd be a bit of a fool, wouldn't we? Sat here talking to ourselves. So it's good to know that we're still being looked at on the various platforms.
And what episode are we on now, David?
100 and something or other, 170 something or other.
That's quite a lot, isn't it?
It is. Suddenly you realise, don't you? That's 3.5 years almost, isn't it?
Yes.
3.5 years, and you've been with us now for well over 12 months, haven't you?
It probably is 18 months, I expect. 18
months of that, yeah. Which is good. Which is very, very good. And we just keep doing it because we enjoy it, and we hope that you, dear viewer, enjoy it as well.
Well, I enjoy the fact it's a slightly different. It's to look at the readings for the Sunday and from a slightly different point of view.
Definitely a different point of view, Chris. I don't think anyone can deny that. Yeah, and of course we're very grateful to all those behind the scenes who make sure it gets out and is present to us. So thanks, Harry, for all that you do in getting it out there for us, and we are very, very grateful for that. So thank you. And thank you to, as I say before, to all the viewers who do make comments and send us likes and thumbs up and things like that. So yeah, so all in all, we're raring to go, and it should be a good one. I hope we're all enjoying the warm weather. And did you have any rain over the weekend, Chris?
We did. Yeah. I think I had enough rain for about 2 minutes, just about enough to make the ground wet, and then it stopped. Not enough to do any good.
Well, on Saturday, I was umpiring in Martinstown, just down the road from you in reality, over the hill and past Thomas Hardy's, not Thomas Hardy, it's all Hardy's monument. And I had a message when I came out and got back in the car to come home from my dear wife, who was in Punnell, say, I hope that you didn't get too wet. And I thought, no, we didn't get any rain at all. When I got home, it had thrown it down in parts of the Bride Valley. But
right.
Nothing anywhere else. We had no rain in Martinstown at all.
No, almost no rain, but we did have a few raindrops in Loaders.
A few raindrops.
Not really good.
And as the skeleton, I see the skeleton, wasn't the skeleton at all.
Scarecrows.
Scarecrow. I see the Scarecrow got good billing in the Bridport News last week, or the Echo, whatever it was.
Oh, I hadn't noticed. I did notice that Emily, the Scarecrow across the road, very proudly put her first place rosette on her Scarecrow.
Marvellous.
Last week.
Marvellous, yeah. I see some of them are still out. I drove through Loaders on Monday night. I'd been to a meeting with the Archdeacon and the Bride Valley people about their upcoming vacancy. And I drove back through Loaders and still saw some scarecrows there. I saw one as you come down through Uploaders where the legs were in the hedge and the body was somewhere else, but whether that was meant to be, and it looked like they were sawing somebody in half in another one. And
yeah, well, those legs, I thought that was almost my favourite one, because you had one person, it was the human cannonball.
Ah, that's
one person in the cannon.
Yeah.
And then the previous person, their legs sticking out of the head.
Sticking out
across their gateway.
Well, I didn't get a chance to, because I was driving, obviously, so I had to be careful I didn't bang into all the cars as I was going along watching them and looking at them. But I thought that was a good one. I liked the one on the stilts. I thought that was fantastic.
Oh, the really high stilts. That was a good one. There was several on stilts.
Yeah, I liked the stilts one. And then there was one outside the school of the girl with the hooplas or whatever she was doing.
Yeah, I guess that's some sort of trapeze artist, wasn't it?
Trapeze artist was good. Then you've got the one cutting somebody in half, hadn't you?
Yeah, well, that one cutting somebody in half, which was outside my house, was Emily's. That was the one that won first place.
First place. So lots of scarecrow things in Lotus, but some of them are still there. I think most of them still around, aren't they?
Yeah, well, it officially finished on Sunday.
Yeah, still around.
So they are gradually being taken down.
Yeah, but if you're able to, and knowing that we have international viewers, of course. Hello, Pat, in upstate New York. Good to see you. You may like to look on the Loaders website. I'm sure you'll find pictures of them on there. They were well worth a good look at and a good laugh. And well done to the people of Loaders. And other places. We've had lots going on this weekend. Netherbury had their open gardens last weekend. And well done to them. And Cheddington also had a similar thing, open studios, I think they had. So that was good to them. We didn't have many people turn up at the National Nature Count in Beaminster on Sunday, but those that did enjoyed spotting beetles and butterflies and the likes. So that was good. And Joe did a wedding in Tolla, which looked gorgeous in the pictures I saw. Everyone was very happy in Tolla. Yeah, it looked very good down there. And I'm sure there were. Oh, you're down at West Bay, of course, with the vintage
rally at West Bay.
Vintage rally, and on Saturday,
all the noises they were making.
Yeah, well, on Saturday when I drove out of Punnell to go over up on the road down to Abbotsbury and then up over Portersham and Hardy's Monument to Martinstown, I passed no end of them in convoy.
Yeah,
a lot of them look like American vehicles coming down to the showground in Bridport. It was fascinating to see them. Some really old and characterful cars. So that was good. So lots going on this weekend. But of course, more importantly, you can join us at one of our churches on Sunday when you'll hear a good exposition of, I'm sure, either the Gospel or Romans 5, which we, in a moment, after a pause, Chris, are going to try and talk.
Are you trying to say it's time for a pause?
Did you notice the segue there, Chris? I think that's a technical radio term, isn't it, the segue?
And I went and spoilt it all, didn't we, rather than just pausing?
Just pausing. Okay, let's go for it. Pause.
We've moved away from the Gospel to Romans chapter 5.
We have.
Therefore, since we are justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we have obtained access to this grace in which we stand. And we boast in our hope of sharing the glory of God. And not only that, but we also boast in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance. Endurance produces character. Character produces hope. And hope does not disappoint us, because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit that has been given to us. For while we were still weak, at the right time Christ died for the ungodly. Indeed, rarely will anyone die for a righteous person, though perhaps for a good person someone might actually dare to die. But God proves his love for us, in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us.
Wow, there we are. A lot to get our teeth into there, Chris.
The first thing that came to mind there was, almost before you're about to get the slipper at school.
Oh, yes.
It's going to hurt me more than it hurts you, and it's all good character building stuff.
But as one who never had the slipper at school, Chris, you obviously did and can relate to this, because I was such a good boy, as you can imagine.
I wasn't.
Well, so you owned up. You know, what you got to do now is go to the confessional and all will be well. So there's an awful lot about this. Are we justified by faith? Because at one time, Paul was very much about works as well, wasn't he? And I think towards the end of his time, he tended to settle on a bit of both, didn't he? If I'm correct in my understanding.
Well, I often go down the phrase of we're justified and saved by faith because we believe in God.
Yeah.
But if we have any ounce of faith, it affects our deeds and our works and what we do.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I like that.
And what we do demonstrates our faith. Because I think if you go over to Hebrews, I think it's Hebrews chapter 7, is it? It's you tell me you have faith, I will show you my faith by my works and by my deeds.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but there's always, and this other one is, do you have freedom of choice? I think that's Romans 8, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so.
Are you only a believer because God chose you, or was it your decision?
Well, of course, you could argue that just because you could, of course, argue that because even though God may have chosen you, you still don't have to follow him. You can rebel.
You can.
And we saw plenty of that in the Old Testament, didn't we? Rebellious nations going against what God was teaching them. But this whole idea of being justified, which I understand the word justified meaning to have been put right with God.
Yeah, that's the phrase I was taught as well.
Yeah, and so you can see if you're a good theological college there, we were both taught that same thing. So if we are to be put right with God, if we go along that line, I love the piece very early on in that passage you read, Chris, about that since we are justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. That idea of peace in anyone's life must be appealing. It is to me, because we see so much where, I don't mean peace as in peace in warring nations, but we see so many people who aren't at peace. I think I come across many people who I don't think are at peace with themselves, never mind with God or with others.
I find it quite interesting, and it seems to be happening. I suppose I've been here long enough now that people I speak to in the street will just talk to me. And often, I've been speaking to them for several years, and I'm amazed at how many of them you just assume they're happy, peaceful people, and then they start to open up about their turmoil inside, and the troubles they've had in life, and that they're not at peace, and that they'd like to be. And actually, that still gives us a good message, because we are justified by faith, therefore we can have that peace.
That's right.
Although it would be a little foolish to say, well, everybody who believes in God has a happy, peaceful life, because it doesn't quite work like that. But it does help.
Yeah, this idea of what we understand about peace, it's almost going back to the being justified, being right with God, put right with God. That's just one of the elements for me of being put right with God. If you've got a kind of inner spiritual peace, which is where what I think we tend to understand by peace, certainly where I tend to understand, that somehow we have to be able to align ourselves spiritually with God. And when we can do that, there is a kind of calmness within, and there is a form of prayer, isn't there, Chris? You may use it. I'm sure you've taught it to people about being still, still in prayer, and how do we come to God in a still kind of way, where we can ignore all of the things that are pouring into our minds from outside. And one of the keys I was taught, and I remember Peter Greenwood, when he led our quiet, when he did one of our weekends away as a parish a few years ago, and it was on that idea of stilling prayer. he was saying that, you need this, just get a word which when you start to suddenly think, have I put the potatoes on? You use the word which brings back to the stillness and the calm. And for me, that's how I start to reach this idea of peace. In other traditions or faith, they may use the word calm, mightn't they, as a way of explaining what peace is with God.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a challenge, isn't it? And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people like this Celtic worship style service that I do, because it's a lot less talking and a lot more silence and peace. Like there's no intercessions. The intercessions are you light a candle and sit in silence. And I always think there's no hiding in silence. You're there before God, and it's just you and your own prayers and just being still. And actually, I think there's also something very different between being still on your own and being still in the presence of with other people that are also being still. Has a completely different atmosphere to it.
Yeah, it does.
And it's so much. I think it does bring peace in your hearts much more than just being when you're walking around and can't get away from. You have to be doing something. You have to be active. You have to have loud music everywhere you go. And sometimes I think people are so busy and active, they're almost deliberately avoiding the stillness in their hearts. And then they're hiding away. They're almost hiding then away from that peace that they can have.
What do you think about the bit around verse 3-4 type of area about this boasting in our sufferings? Do you think when the word boasting is being translated, it means boasting as we do, like we tell people how good we are? Or do you think the word boasting means that we're able to share in what it means to suffer with God? I don't think I'd want to boast about suffering. I can't see the point really of boasting in that sense. But if it means getting an understanding that we share with Christ in his suffering and he shares with us in ours.
Yeah, and I suppose maybe I'm a bit more into the boasting bit of it at times, because I've had people when they say something to you and then almost apologise, you can almost boast, look, I don't think you can say anything to me about my Christian faith that I haven't already heard. Mm-hmm. I've worked in some pretty rough environments where I've, you know what I mean? And there's not really it's not a boasting in pride. It's a boasting in acknowledgement that you understand what's going on.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Do you think boasting in this sense is about being prepared to talk about it and to share?
Well, I think so, because I think one of the answers I had, in which I always told a lot of people when I worked in these factories, was, if you're asking me questions to take the mickey out of me, don't bother. Mm-hmm. If you really want to know about Jesus, I'll tell you.
Yeah, I had a great friend of mine. In fact, we went off to what were those ABUM conferences? That's a conference when you're still putting yourself forward for discernment, for ministry. And one of the last things you have to do is go to a conference where they assess whether or not, they believe you're being called to priestly ministry or whatever. And I remember us going to what was then the Advisory Board of Ministry Conference. I went to Chester to the retreat house, and there was a guy also in Lichfield Diocese called Mick. And Mick was a motorbiker who's drunk and sworn and taken drugs and all kinds. But one day woke up in the vicarage, on the settee in the vicarage, because he'd come off his bike drunk into the vicarage hedge, and the vicar dragged him in and put him to sober up on his settee, which I thought was a very kind thing. And Mick found God in a big way, sensible way, but a big way. And when he found God, at that point he was working in the factory that made toilets in Wolverhampton. You see them in a lot of public places, and he worked in the factory that made the toilets. And he had his Bible constantly by him on his machine or whatever it is he worked on. And if people started taking literally, without using the word, of what he was making out of him, he used to get his Bible out and share with them a passage. So, in effect, he was quite happy to boast about his faith and his endurance and what he'd gone through, and how he believed God had saved him from basically ruining his life. And as far as I'm aware, and I haven't looked him up for a while, I think he's now chaplain at Stafford University, amongst other things that he does, bringing other young people to a realistic understanding of God for themselves. So is he boasting through his sufferings and knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, character produces hope, and hope doesn't disappoint us?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but also I think, that peace and that hope. I'm going back to one of the factories when it closed, and they like 250 people got made redundant. One of the guys I worked with, he says, "Chris, you're different. What is it about you?" Because everybody in this factory is utterly devastated about losing your job, but you've still got your hope and knowing there's a better purpose in life. This hasn't taken away everything in your life.
No.
Now, sometimes I think maybe that was a bit foolish, because I did then spend 2 years unemployed.
Yeah.
But you still knew the character of God produces that hope of what you're enduring.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the one thing I've learned is, just because you believe in God does not mean your life's going to be easy from now on.
Oh, I can guarantee that being a Christian isn't an easy thing. We don't choose to be Christians because we want an easy life, I would hope.
No, we don't. And I think, anybody in, the position me or you are in, or nearly most people who are in a position in churches, if you want the easy life, you don't go and put your neck on the line, because sometimes you're opening yourself up to put your head above the pulpit. You're going to be shot at, sort of thing.
And that brings us into the last section, in effect, because I always get a little bit smiley at this bit, that Christ died for the ungodly.
Yeah.
I think Christ died for us all, whether we're ungodly or not. And I'll go with that. But indeed, rarely will anyone die for a righteous person, though perhaps some person might actually dare to die for a good person.
What's the difference between good and righteous?
Well, that's a good point, Chris.
I think we'll have to leave that for when Reverend Neary's back.
Oh, definitely. I'll get her to write an essay for us. We can read it out on air. I mean, what is the difference between good and righteous? Well, righteous means you've been put right with God, so there's got to be a faith element to that, do you think?
Yeah, and good.
Whereas just being good, you don't necessarily have to be a believer in anything to be a good person.
No.
So you could be good and say, I don't have any faith, therefore I haven't been put right with God. I just do it because it's what we do.
Yep. See, I think my favourite part of this passage is probably that last verse.
Yeah.
While God proves his love, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Yeah. And whenever I stand at the pulpit, I always say, look, all are baptised are welcome to come and receive communion. If you want a blessing, do. But remember, at the Lord's table, all are welcome.
Yeah.
And while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And I often, again, this is a common conversation I have with people. I'd come to church if it wasn't so full of horrible people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Full of sinners. And actually, the church is full of sinners. And it's easy to see what everybody else does wrong without really seeing what you're doing wrong yourself. And, we're here for everybody.
Yeah, take the log out of your own eye first.
Yes.
Oh, I've dropped my Bible. No, it's gone on the floor. Never mind.
As long as she doesn't eat it.
No, she won't. She's fast asleep. So that's good. So there we are, Chris. Lots for people to think about. Righteousness, goodness. Are we saved? How do we understand
suffering?
How do we understand that? Where is God in all of that? So lots to think about. Do you have a good think, and let us know. Any comments? Always happy to receive them. Any thoughts? Type them on there. We look forward to reading them.
Yep. And if you want to know how to get hold of us, all the details will be put up in the credits afterwards.
They will. And there we are. So another week completed, safely navigated, whether correct or not, we'll leave that to the experts. But we hope that we've given you a chance to have a good think and a good muse over whatever. What's the reading again? Romans 5, 1 to 8?
Romans chapter 5, verses 1 to 8, that was. And if you want to hear it all again, we'll see you in church on Sunday morning.
We will. Thanks so much, Chris. It's good to have been here with you. And hopefully Reverend Debs will be back with us next week. If not, it'll be you and me. In fact, it will be you and me, but I can't record. I'll let everyone into a secret. I can't record on Thursday morning. So we'll have to see if we can get another date in the diary, Chris.
Oh, okay.
I've got to go to the Mission Oversight and Pastoral Committee meeting in the Scout Hut in Beer Regis.
Oh, good.
We get to some of the best places in the world in our diocese.
You do, don't you? You do.
Beer Regis is a delightful place, and the Scout Hut, well, there we are. Dib, dib, dib. That's all we need to know.
Yep. All right. Thank you very much. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.